The Paul Leslie Interviews.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to welcome this artist. Felicia Collins is a guitarist, vocalist, performing and recording artist. She has a new album, Felicia Collins Discovers the Blues. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. Nice to be here with you. It's a while to get together, but here we are.
Good things come to those who wait. I think most stories are best from the beginning. Where were you born?
Oh, I was born in Jackson, Tennessee.
And you were born in Jackson, Tennessee, but where did you grow up?
I grew up in Albany, New York, between Albany and New York City, because one of my grandparents lived in New York. One of my other grandparents lived in Philadelphia, where my mother's from. And I grew up in Albany and went to school there until I was about 17. Then I was out of there after high school.
What music do you have the most vivid memory of from youth?
Oh, from the kid days? Oh, gosh, that would have to be from my best friend, Georgiana, lived across the street from me. We met when we were like 2 years old, and I lived on a narrow little block. I could just dart right across the street to her house. And we were both the only kid in the family. And I used to spend just about every weekend over her house and sometimes after school, because her father, he was the most music-loving man, George Hairston, God rest his soul. He would play records. He even had a room called the Record Room. And he would buy records every weekend and play records every weekend. His whole family would come over, and they'd be like cooking food and dancing and playing cards and talking loud. And I would hear every soul, funk, blues record ever created constantly over there. And that just literally just went into my veins as much as George's mother's cooking did. It was a fond memory. It stuffed me with all the music that just crammed my mind and influenced me till this day.
What musicians would you say have influenced you the most?
Probably James Brown, Michael Jackson.
How did you come to pick up the guitar?
You know what? That's kind of unclear. I get asked that a lot, but I really don't remember back that far. I think my parents gave me like a toy guitar when I was a baby, and they realized it was something I really liked, so it just became a staple when it came time for gifts, like Christmas and birthdays and stuff. And then by the time I got a little older, like 5 or 6, it was my thing. By the time I would see people playing it on TV and in the movies and in person, I really wanted to learn how to play it. Like it's already part of me by then.
Can you remember some of your early experiences with blues music?
My earliest experience with blues music probably came from like listening to music over at Georgiana's house. A lot of the music was, if it wasn't straight out blues, which a lot of it was influenced by blues. Even the rock and roll, like I can remember being little and hearing the Beatles records, and everything was influenced by blues. My Aunt Bebe, who's my mother's sister, she was a singer. She was a solo artist, and whenever she would do matinees, my mom would take me to see her, like at the Apollo or different places in New York City. And as long as they were early enough to play, like about 3 in the afternoon or something. So I could never go to the night shows because I was too little. But the day shows, I would go. And I remember seeing my Aunt Bebe opening for B.B. King and Bo Diddley, who I just fell in love with, and we were friends for a minute when I was a baby. I have pictures sitting on his lap, him trying to get me to look at the camera, and me just like gawking at this red guitar, like a box, on his lap. Well, the blues was all around. I wasn't really aware of that I was listening to the blues. You know what I mean? It was just there.
Tell us about the first time you met Al Jarreau.
The first time I met Al, it was in Skyline Studio here in New York. Nile Rodgers was producing his record, and I had just come off the Thompson Twins tour, which was my very first tour. I think Nile's the one that introduced me to the Thompson Twins, and So began my career as a professional musician. And I just come back and I went to visit Nile. Been on the road for like 9 months or something on that world tour. And I came back and Al Jarreau was in the studio. That was Nile's current project. I've made friends with Al right then and there. He asked me if I would sing some backgrounds on the track they were doing that day. So I went in there, put the headphones on, started singing. Al and I became friends that evening. And next thing I know, he was calling me, asking me if I would go on tour with him because Nile was playing guitar all over that album. And Nile has a very distinctive style of playing. And according to Nile and some other people, my style sounds very similar. When Al asked him, you know, who am I going to get to play these parts? He was like, she's right there. Al was like, oh, really? Really, Miss Felicia, you play this? I was like, yep, I sure can.
Do you have any recollections of playing on the song Pleasure by Al Jarreau?
Well, I was singing. I'm singing the little solo voice you hear. Whoa, oh, oh, that's me singing. That was the session I'm talking about, the day I met Al Jarreau. And I'm singing little ad-libs with him on the verses and throughout the choruses. That's the little solo voice you hear beside Al Jarreau's voice is moi, c'est moi.
In Paul Schaefer's book, he says that he stole you away from Cyndi Lauper.
Yeah, he does say that. Well, actually, he's not a thief, I'm happy to say. And what happened was I was on tour with Cyndi, the Hat Full of Stars tour, and it was like a summer tour. I think we did it for like 4 months or something like that. And the very last day of that tour, we wound up in L.A., and I think the very last performance was on Jay Leno. Jay Leno show was the last performance. And I came back to the hotel, and there was a message from my mom. So I called her back, and I'm like, what's up, Mom? She said, well, I got this call from Paul Schaefer. I said, Paul Schaefer, like from TV, Paul Schaefer? And she said, yeah, well, it sounded like that voice of his. I said, okay. I said, well, what did he want? She told me, well, he wanted to get in touch with you, but I told him I would call you and give you his number. I wouldn't give him your number, typical my mother. So I said, okay, give me the number. And I called up Paul, and that's when he said, you know, hi. I'm sure you've heard all the hoopla involving Dave Letterman's new show, CBS. I said, well, yeah, you'd have to live on another planet not to know all that's going on. So he said, oh, well, I'm expanding the band, and I'd be honored to have you on guitar. And I said, oh. I said, what happened to Sid McGuinness? He said, well, Sid's still here. I'm just expanding. We're going to have 2 guitar players and another keyboard player. I was like, wow, who's playing keyboard? And he said, Bernie Worrell. And I would like to have you and Bernie Worrell be our new band members. And I said, man, that's fantastic. But I wasn't really sure if I wanted to do it because I didn't know what they did. It was different from just going to play in somebody's band. It was TV, and I just thought it was a whole other world and not really anything I did. And he assured me, you know, it's the same thing. You just play your instrument and, like, learn tunes. And I said, well, let me think about it. He said, you want to think about it? I said, yeah. He said, well, it can't be too long because we've really got to get going and start putting together rehearsals and stuff. I said, well, how about give me 5 days? He said, sure. So I hung up. I went out to lunch with a couple of friends of mine from college who live in L.A. now. They were like, Felicia, you better call this man back. It's a steady job. Because I was talking about, well, while I'm out here, I'm going to make myself meet Janet Jackson and go on tour with her. They were like, Felicia, you know, who's in Janet Jackson's band? I said, I don't know. Stephen said, exactly. He said, more people are going to know you in one night when they turn on the David Letterman show. And then my friend Jackie goes, but Felicia, it's a steady job. And I just thought about it, and I was like, wow, I'm nuts. Then I called up my friend Freddie Washington, who played bass with Al Jarreau. he plays with Steely Dan now. I said, Freddie, I said, I got this dilemma. I said, I got this offer. And Freddie was like, unlike my two friends who aren't in the business, who mean well, who still end up being correct, but Freddie was telling me more from the business point of view, like, definitely take that job, Felicia. So I was convinced, and I called Paul back a few days later and told him I wanted to come and play with him. He was like, fabulous. And thus started my recruitment into the world's most dangerous band.
When you do his voice, you sound more like him than he does.
I love Paul to death. I wish I was hearing his voice every day still.
Do you think that when people watch The Late Show that they don't have any idea about what a great musician Paul Shaffer is?
Yeah, I think it's hard to, because, you only get glimpses of him for a few seconds at a time. I know before I started working with him, the old show, Late Night, I grew up watching that, and I didn't really know to what extent Paul Shaffer's genius reaches. I knew he played keyboards. I hear a little come back from a commercial, and you'd hear, dun, dun, or then the audience would applaud. But I didn't know what he was doing up until then, because you can't hear what's going on during the break. Although you'd hear a little bit more on the early days of Late Night. The band was featured a lot more, and I couldn't believe there was a band like that on television. I was used to those old orchestras like on Johnny Carson and Mike Douglas and those guys. I couldn't believe there was this four-piece like funk rock band doing it. That was just unheard of. It was crazy. But I knew he could play, but I had no idea to what extent until until I went to do the show with Cindy. Because before the wrap-up of Late Night on NBC, one of his last shows had Cyndi Lauper when I was on tour with Cindy, and that's when I worked with Paul Shaffer, and he was just incredible. I just thought, wow, this guy's awesome. And of course, seeing him work every day on Late Show just further proved it. But to answer your question, no, I don't think people know.
What did you think about Sid McGuinness when you met him? What was your first impression?
The first time I met Sid was the first time I met that band with Anton and Will and Paul, which was at Madison Square Garden. Paul Simon was doing some kind of benefit to get a mobile health unit for inner city kids. And he had this big benefit at the Garden, and I was working with Nile at the time. It was one of the breaks from the Al Jarreau. I was off for like a few months, and I was working on an album with Nile and Sweet Face. And Niall got the call to come and do this benefit, so we did that. And Paul Shaffer, the world's most dangerous band, was the house band for the evening. And that's when I first met Paul and those guys. And we were playing Good Times, and I remember just asking Sid to double the bass line on Good Times, because I already had the rhythm part covered, and Niall would be clapping his hands and reading the song and stuff, and we didn't need a third, yet a third one. So I asked him if he would double the bass line. I recall that he was just so big smile on his face and just switched right over to it, and he saw the sense in it. I remember being aware that he wasn't like, oh man, I wanted to play the guitar part. Like, not at all. Like, they were so professional, and it was instant. Like, the second I asked him if he would, he was like, sure. He just switched over to the bass line, and he just played it instantly, and he was good with it. And I just thought, like, yeah, I like this guy. That's when I first met him. And the first time I worked with him on the show, I just thought how amazing he was. He can play anything, and he's still excited about it. Like, he'll play a song that he's been playing since he was 16 and still play it like he's 16. He's like all happy stuff.
You got the chance to perform with so many musicians as a result of being on that show. Probably hundreds.
Mm-hmm.
Who did you click with the most? Was there any musician who came on that you really hit it off with?
Man, you know what? I'm sure there's some. I wish I had time to really think about this, because I'll probably, after I talk to you, I'll think, later on tonight, I'll go, oh, wow, yeah, so-and-so and I became best friends. Man, that was like the general rapport, actually. Yeah, that was the general rapport with everyone. I think because everybody was so pleased that our band could just play what they needed, that they would instantly be relaxed. And yeah, I remember hitting it off with the architect of rock and roll, Little Richard.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Nice.
he was very happy with my playing. And so a lot of guitar players are, come to think of it, they're very happy with how I play their music. George Benson, we became good friends, and a lot of people, just Willie Nelson, you know, maybe I'll have to say Willie Nelson, because we became good friends after that. And he even wanted to know if I was, you know, are you working on something? I would love, he said, maybe you could get Willie Nelson to come and sing on something. This is him telling me. I said, you think Willie Nelson would do it? He goes, I'm pretty sure he would. I was like, okay, I'll see if I can arrange that. So I ended up getting a song together and flew down to Austin to his studio to get his vocal on it. And it's called That's What They All Say. And it's like beautiful, beautiful song. You know, these people who are some of the biggest personalities they know are some of the sweetest, most generous people they'll ever meet. Like Willie Nelson, who's bigger than him? People like Valerie Simpson and Nick Ashford, like the biggest legendary songwriting American music duo, and they just share their journey, their huge journey with just us regular people, like just so, and they don't have to. They don't get anything out of it other than joy. People like this blow my mind. Like they're so huge and they're so famous, but that is the least important thing to them, because they just don't have the egos. They have the talent, but not the egos. And that's something like I would like to share with the folks listening. There's a lot of that going on out here.
Can you give us your recollections of the last episode of The Late Show? What were your memories of that taping?
Well, I remember preparing, I think we played the theme differently, maybe, or something like that. And special wardrobe. Yeah, I think we had special wardrobe. Or was that the last Christmas special? It's getting foggy already. It's just like every day of The Late Show. I leave work. I'd go around the corner to have dinner. The maitre d' would, hi, Felicia, who was on the show today? And I would go, I couldn't remember. Like, half an hour later, I'm like, I can't remember. some actress in some band. Then halfway through dinner, I go, oh, yeah, okay, I remember now. And the girl who plays on so-and-so and so-and-so show, whatever. And this band, that band, it would literally just go right out of my mind afterwards. But that last show, it was really special, and it was really great, because I'm glad it went out like that. I'm glad it wasn't a sucky show. It was a show that we were all proud of. And I remember Dave want to say goodbye to all the people that helped him do his show. He started with the band, and he started with me. I wasn't especially choked up or anything all leading up to it. I didn't think I was going to be. But then after he said, and I want to start with this lady right here, Felicia Collins, and I just got really choked up. All of a sudden, it hit me like, wow, this is it. This is it. I'm going to miss this. And it was just a collective sadness amongst everybody that I felt a wave go through us at that very second. I could feel it, and it was hard for me to hold back the tears. It really was. But it was a strange thing, because it was sad, but at the same time, we were so happy to have done it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is that how you would describe the era of your life in The Late Show? Mostly it was a happy experience.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. It was a total happy experience. I would be happy going to work with a toothache. That's how good it was. I'd be bopping down the street smiling with a toothache because I was going there. I mean, it was awesome. I'd get to sleep late. I'd get up, get dressed, head downtown to the Ed Sullivan Theater to play rock and roll and play the guitar and sing and get to dress up and put on makeup and meet famous people and be on television. I mean, everything else is a come down, you know what I mean? Everything else is a come down. Somebody could hand me a Grammy right now and say, Felicia, wow, this album you just did. Guess what? You just got the Grammy. The Grammy is called the Grammy of all time. I'd be like, whatever. Yeah, thanks. Beat the blank. Yeah, thanks. Whatever. Grammy of all time. Yeah, great. I'd rather have my job back.
You have this new album out. It's Felicia Collins Discovers the Blues.
Mm-hmm.
What was the initial inspiration that made you to decide to record this album?
Well, it was Nick Ashford, the late, great Nicholas Ashford from the legendary duo Ashford and Simpson. Their club, the Sugar Bar, is one of the coolest spots in New York. They already had this Thursday night open mic thing, which was described by Paul Schaefer as the hottest ticket in town. Nick Ashford added a Tuesday night called Nothing But the Blues. And for the first year, he would ask me, because I would go to it, and he would ask me, like, Felicia, you got to come up here and do a set. And I didn't play the blues. I didn't know any blues songs. And he would tell me, well, let's play some blues songs. He's like, you can already do it. I can tell by how you play and how you sing. It's, you'd be a natural. So after about a year of being urged and seeing Andre Smith do it, and it hit me like, oh, yeah, okay, I could do this, because I was really inspired by Andre's set. And I told Nick and Valerie, I said, you know what, I'm going to do one. And they were like, oh, great, great, great. So they really built it up, and I found some tunes I wanted to do. I did my research. While I was looking for blues songs, I could see, like, wow, this is the deepest pool of a genre I've ever seen. It was just amazing, and I just got really into it, and I loved it, and it came so easily to me. I couldn't believe it. So once I did that, the bug kind of bit me, and I said, I think I'm going to do some blues. I'll do this for a minute, make a blues record. It was Cheryl Millison on Letterman show, who books all the talent, that came up with the title, because she knew the story and how it happened, how I started getting into playing the blues. And she said, you should call your record Felicia Collins Discovers the Blues. And I said, that's great. And I did.
Tell us about the song Take You Out of Here.
That's a song that Valerie Simpson and Nick Ashford wrote the lyrics to. And she and I did this exchange a few months back where I had a melody with some music that I needed lyrics to. So I sent her that, and she sent me the lyrics to Take You Out of Here. It was just the lyric, no music at all, just the lyric. So I took that lyric and just made that song out of that lyric. And then she sent me back the most beautiful, oh my God, this song. I just sent her this beautiful melody, if I may say so. And she put these lyrics to it, called it Cold Glue. We didn't finish it in time to get it on the record, so it'll be on the next installment. And that's how Take You Out of Here came about. It was just, I played it for her, or I sent her an MP3 of it, and she called me back immediately. As soon as I pushed send, like about 10 minutes later, the phone's ringing. She goes, hey, it's Val. I said, what's up, Valerie? I said, you like it? She goes, I love it. I love it. She said, this is a hit, girl. So I said, okay, that one's going on the album.
What about the one Waiting for the Other Shoe to Drop?
That's an instrumental.
Yeah.
That happened while I was in the studio, because I went down to Shreveport to do the record at Blade Studio, so I could have Brady Blade on drums and Tony Hall on the bass and Mr. Ivan Neville on keys. So the four of us did the tracks to the album, most of the album down there. And that was just an instrumental we just started jamming on. And I didn't have a title while we were recording it, and it was just because of the way we had it going on. At first, we would do a stop and then would wait a couple of seconds for the track to resume, and we would crack up every time because we could never tell where the one was going to be. And I said, jokingly, it's like waiting for the other shoe to drop. And I said, okay, that's the title. So there you go.
And what about Mr. Right Now?
Mr. Right Now is the first blues song that I wrote when I decided to accept Nick and Val's offer to come and do a blues night at the Sugar Bar. Since I was doing all this research and finding tunes to put in the set, I said, well, I got to write one. I got to put one in there. So I wrote Mr. Right Now for a performance at the Sugar Bar, just so I could have one that I wrote in the set. That's where that came from. So that's my first blues song that I wrote. And I did it really in the tradition. It was very heartfelt. I wanted to do it right because I really got it. I was like, I totally get this. I know exactly what to do. I know exactly what to write. The little tongue-in-cheek aspect of that song, the smokiness of it, that slow. Like, oh, shoot now, I wanted to have that kind of response after the downbeat, but people in the audience go, oh, shoot now. So that's where the inspiration of that song came from. And Mr. Right Now, it was the last lyric in the verses, so I just decided to make that the title. You might not be Mr. Right, but you sure are Mr. Right Now.
That's very clever.
Well, thank you.
Is it true that you gave some guitar lessons, that you taught some guitar to Samuel L. Jackson?
Yeah, that's true. Yep, that's true.
Now that's bragging rights.
You want to know how that came about? We were doing the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which we did as the CBS Orchestra, Paul's band, every year. We were the house band for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Paul's been doing it for like 30-something years. One year, Buddy Guy was being inducted. I was there sitting at the table, and I saw Sam Jackson. I had brought my brother, one of my twin brothers, as my guest that year. And he noticed. He goes, isn't that Sam Jackson standing over there? I said, where? He said, in that tracksuit, in that Kangol hat. I was like, sure is. So I said, come on, let me introduce you to him, because I had met Sam already on the show. I brought my brother over there to meet him. And I told Sam that he should play a blues guitarist. And he said, why? Because my head is bald? Because at the time, because the Buddy Guy had just shaved his head. I said, no. I said, I can just see it. I said, I can see the cigarette hanging out the corner of your mouth with your eye squint where the smoke is blowing by your eye. I can see it. I said, and I can show you how to play enough so it'll look for real, so it won't look corny. I said, because it's all in the face. I said, it's all about the facial expressions. They have to be involuntary. You can't fake that. I said, but I can just show you basic licks where it'll just happen involuntarily. And it'll look so real, but you'll be playing blues licks for real. I said, you really need to play that. So he thought I was a little nuts. But then he called me 3 weeks later to tell me that he just got this script this morning. Felicia Collins, girl, you don't never call nobody's leaving me this message. You don't never call nobody back. You are the hardest person in show business to get a hold of. Please call me back. I got something to tell you. So I called him back. And he told me, he said, this morning, you'll never guess what I got. I said, what'd you get? He said, I got a script, and it's the character for me is a blues guitar player. I said, get out of town. He goes, I don't know. He goes, I don't know if you're psychic or what. I was like, wow. He said, yeah. So he goes, I'm going to take you up on what you said, that you would teach me. I was like, you got it. So he told me his schedule when he'd be coming to New York in a few months, and he let me know when he got into town. And then I went over to the hotel he and LaTanya were staying, giving them lessons, just basic lessons. And I approached it the way I learned when I didn't know anything about music. I wasn't being taught by anybody, so I knew he could get it the same way. It could come into his mind the same way it came into my mind. And I had by the 8th lesson, I had him playing little solo lines over top of my rhythm. He was killing it. Sounded like a little baby B.B. King up in there. LaTanya was like amazed. She couldn't believe it. So that was that. And then when he got to Letterman to promote that movie, it was called Black Snake Moon. He told Letterman the story, and I could tell Dave was kind of like wowed out too. He was like, really? That happened? He's looking over at me like, yeah. Nodding my head, yep, that's the truth. And Sam told that story everywhere he went. Mm-hmm.
What is the best thing about being Felicia Collins?
Not having to be anybody else. That's the best thing.
Nice. I like that.
Well, only you can be you. I'm not sure I'm sure there's tons of people that it's all relative. They might be, I'm not saying like it's not as good to be other people, I'm just saying I wouldn't be as good at it.
This question is totally open-ended.
Okay.
For anyone who's listening to this, what would you say to them?
Who's listening to this interview with you and me?
Yeah, wherever they are.
Wherever you are, I would say, if you're a music lover, then please buy my record, Felicia Collins Discovers the Blues. And if you are a media mogul, please hire Felicia Collins, period. That's what I would say.
Now, for my last question, who is Felicia Collins?
Oh, Felicia Collins is an old soul. I would say I'm a true person. I would say I'm a fairly egoless person, and therefore not afraid of being wrong, because I figure people, if they love me, they're still going to love me if I'm wrong. So I don't have much of an ego. Easy for me to love. I'm used to being loved from birth. I take friendship very seriously. And if I'm with you, I'm with you. And I'm a badass when it comes to playing music and singing and all that. And that pretty much sums me up.
I like your style.
Well, thank you.
It's been a joy to talk to you.
I'm sorry it took so long, because I've been wanting to do this forever.